Lucy.
And I'm Michelle.
Welcome to yet another episode of Tudoriferous, the biographical podcast that examines lives in the Tudor era. That was Rob sneezing.
And today, the fourth episode of Julius II.
Right, not Julius the Fourth.
Not Julius the Fourth. Not Julius the Fourth. I was very careful.
Before we look at Julius and the rise of yet another great council to check up on the antics of the Pope, we'll take our customary detour into the world of the Tudors.
Ooh, yes,
I'll try and get a bit of Tudor in each time.
Yeah.
Because we thought it was odd last week that Henry should have stayed in Julius's good books despite, all that he'd done.
Yeah. I mean, the alum trade is hitting him exactly where it hurts a pope the most. Money.
Yeah, and just saying, I don't know anything about it. I mean,
yeah.
that's not fooling anybody, is it?
No.
Yeah. Well, there are a series of letters that might give us some insight into this. We're in 1507. Henry wrote to Julius suggesting there should be a crusade against the Ottomans in Hungary, and they should get back the Holy Sepulchre and avenge centuries of wrongs done to the Christians.
I'm sorry, Henry sent that to him?
Henry said that. Henry. Yep, our Henry.
That doesn't seem like him.
No,
Did
it
Bishop
really doesn't.
Fox send it and just sign Henry's name to it, and Henry's completely oblivious that this has occurred?
Yes. Yeah, it's another bill, just sign it.
Yeah.
Well, it does seem quite a risk given that the alum trade is very much in full swing at this point.
Yeah.
I presume it was quite refreshing for the Pope to have someone other than Isabella
Yes.
proactively saying, let's all go on crusade,
Yeah.
rather than him suggesting it to the rulers, and all the rulers shuffling their feet and tugging their earlobes.
I've
and
just got to
looking
get this
shifty.
finished first.
Yes, I won't be a tick.
Yeah.
Hang on in there.
Yeah. I'll do it as soon as my reign is over.
Well, Julius wrote to Henry saying that it wasn't practicable for all Christian rulers to do this together. And he was being pragmatic because he knew he wouldn't be able to get them all to agree, because he'd tried, and it doesn't work.
No.
But how about England, Spain and Portugal, he said. Because Spain and Portugal, since they already had experience of expelling Moors. But England, probably only because Henry had brought up the subject in the first place, I think.
I'm trying to remember when England and Portugal's very close relationship started. Wasn't that just after John of Gaunt's daughter married into the Portuguese monarchy? It's still going today. There's an English conclave in Portugal.
Is that really?
Yeah, I watched a whole history hit episode on it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have English citizenship, but most of them are born and raised in Portugal.
Wow. I
Yeah.
had no idea. I had no idea we were so close to the Portuguese.
Yeah, it's apparently huge, and it's been there for a long time. Yes. Is it? Longest alliance. England and Portugal, 651 years. 1373 is when it happened. Yeah. So it's called, the episode is called The Longest Alliance, England and Portugal, 651 years.
Well, we were talking about doing episodes on Portugal, because we haven't really
Touched it at all.
gone near it at all, apart from when Columbus was there.
And when Isabella was marrying her daughters off to it. But even then, we didn't really discuss Portugal itself. But yeah, it's a huge alliance, apparently. It's been an alliance that's been in effect since June 16th, 1373. And it's the longest continuing alliance in history in the entire world.
Wow.
You didn't even know about it.
Didn't know a thing. Well, I've got quite a few books on Portuguese exploration, so when we get a minute, I'll start on them. But then I've got quite a lot of books on the Renaissance and quite a lot of books on Charles the Bold.
Yes.
Quite a lot of books on lots of things. So,
I should say I've been quite ill for the last couple of weeks, all I've done is watch TV. And History Hit has been very good. It's a subscription service, sort of like Netflix, but it's entirely history, documentaries, and podcasts. Nothing but. Yeah.
Yeah.
My kind of TV show.
Yes. Yeah, I listen to History Hit, but I've not joined, so I've not watched any of the documentaries. Documentaries on the television tend to annoy me. I end up getting
Arguing with
irritated by them. Yes. Not just Philippa Langley, but all of them.
Yes, there is a very, very popular history show on YouTube, and I won't name it, but every single episode, I finally stopped listening or watching her YouTubes because I'm like, no, that's wrong. That never occurred. I've got 5 sources that say that this never occurred, and you're putting it out there as if it did. No, stop.
It's not so much the factual bit. I think, why do you think we want to watch you driving? Yes. Why do you think we need to peer in your ear hole when you're looking at art rather than looking at the art?
Gotcha.
So I end up getting annoyed.
I'm going to laugh if we get a bunch of emails or messages saying, I guess that it's this person on YouTube.
Well, all right, we'll have a competition. Who annoys Michelle?
Oh, dear.
Anyway, back to Henry. He was quite happy about this tripartite agreement with England, Spain and Portugal. But he said, if Spain and Portugal won't do it, I'm quite happy to go it alone.
What? He couldn't have written any of that. He had absolutely no idea. Like that did not come up at all in any of our research for the background.
No. I wonder if he had any intention at all, or whether he knew. He must have done his homework.
Yes.
I thought, sometimes you offer to do something for somebody and you know they're going to say no.
Yes.
So you think, I'm quite safe offering.
And then they say yes, and you're like, oh dear.
Oh, God.
Oh, no, I actually have to do this. Okay.
Yeah, like people who say, you got doing anything on Saturday? And you go, oh, no. What have you got in mind? Oh, well, would you mind babysitting? Oh, gosh.
Oh, yeah, I'll do it. Your
I
baby's
blundered into that one.
teething, has colic. Sure.
Anyway, yeah, this is the letter. I said last time or the time before, I thought I had a vague recollection of the Pope being so pleased with the letter from Henry that he read it out to all the cardinals and said, why can't you all be more like Henry? This is the letter.
And we went, what? And we're still going, what?
Well, even more so now, and we've read the letter, yeah. But in the same year, Henry again wrote to Julius and Ferdinand, promising to send English archers to support Ferdinand in his North African campaign. And if you remember from Ferdinand's episode, he styled himself Emperor of all Africa.
Yes.
All of it.
Yes. He hasn't landed there yet, but he is the emperor.
Even the bits they didn't know about. Oh, the smugness of these people. And the reason why Henry was being so accommodating? He wanted to marry Ferdinand's daughter, Juana.
Oh.
He was in love, if De Puebla's to be believed. He was absolutely besotted by her.
Well, he did meet her.
He did meet her, and he liked her, and he didn't think she was mad at all.
No.
But as we know, neither the marriage nor the crusade came to anything. And since the crusade was dependent on the marriage,
That would be
I suppose
why.
it's not surprising, yeah. I don't know if the Pope was disappointed that the crusade never happened. Henry died 2 years later, so he had that excuse, I suppose. Oh, I'm just sort of any minute now, any minute. I'm on my way. Anyway, back to Italy, I'm afraid. If you listen to Battle Royale podcast, they've got a special sort of jingle thing for, oh God, back to Italy. Right, the Great Council. A bit of history behind this. The Council of Constance, 1414 to 1418, oh, it's the same as the First World War, isn't it? Only 500 years before. Decreed that councils should meet at regular intervals to assess how the Pope was doing. That followed years of schism and popes running off to Avignon.
Right.
So, yeah, it's quite important to know what the Pope was up to. None of the succeeding popes were keen on this running assessment idea.
Well, yeah, they're supposed to be infallible, and they really
Yes.
want to get up to bad things. How can they do that when somebody's telling them not to?
It does seem very odd to have an assessment of someone who's meant to be infallible. Well, Sixtus definitely wasn't keen on this, and as we'll see, Julius definitely wasn't either. But Louis had a plan. He was going to attack the Pope not just physically, but spiritually. So he called all the French bishops to a meeting where he got them to agree that he was perfectly within his rights to attack Julius, physically attack him, militarily, since the Pope had declared war on him, a ruler in his own right and not one of the Pope's vassals.
He got his bishops to say this?
Yeah.
Wow.
I suppose they are ultimately answerable to the Pope, aren't they?
Yeah.
So for them to say,
Yeah.
actually the Pope's in the wrong on this one,
Yeah.
it's quite a big leap for conscience.
Unless they're hoping that by doing this, one of them gets to be Pope.
I think they're all hoping that, yes. It seems they've sort of rather unseemly tussled to get those purple slippers on.
Yes. After all, they don't have to travel far. They just go back to Avignon.
Yes. Well, that's what everyone's afraid of with the French ones. They also agreed that the Pope had ceded his right to expect obedience from France. Louis's plan was not just to take Venice as he'd first intended, but also to depose the Pope. So we've come across sort of quite big leaps in this. 1 minute it's we all need to tell Venice to behave themselves. Oh no, actually we're all four of us are going to take it over and obliterate it completely. And now it's, once we've finished with Venice, we're going to get rid of the Pope.
Yes.
Yeah. But although on some days Louis was enthusiastic with his plan, on others he sort of shrank back from the enormity of what he planned to do, which is understandable, because deposing a Pope, it's a massive undertaking.
It also goes against all of the tenets of his faith.
Yes.
And I know he's attacking the Pope, but when I was researching him, he was quite pious for the first little while.
Yes. And maybe he's thinking it's perfectly acceptable because the Pope is bringing the popedom into disrepute and we need to get rid of him just to bring the papacy back into a sort of vague feeling of decency.
It's just such a hard thing to think about, that you're about to depose somebody who your entire life from infancy on you've been told is infallible and speaks for God.
And I think that's why he's up and down about it, because
Right.
when he's got his counsellors around him saying, yeah, let's do this, he's all for it. But then maybe in 2 a.m, he starts to think, oh, what am I doing? This is really scary. Well, in the end, he decided to wait for spring, when hopefully he'd have Maximilian and Henry with him. Hopefully. The problem had stemmed from when the French cardinals had wanted to go back to France following the death of d'Amboise, Cardinal d'Amboise. And Julius hadn't let them go.
Ah.
I couldn't work out why he wouldn't let them go, but then I read that d'Amboise had left a lot of stuff. Property, lands, money, that sort of thing.
Oh, and the Pope wanted it for himself.
He wanted it for himself, and the French cardinals thought they had a right to it as well.
Right.
So they were, all of them, hoping to take over some of d'Amboise' rather lucrative benefices, since he was Orléans Saint-Malo, I think. He had quite a few.
Money. It all comes down to money.
Yeah. And also, it was up to Julius to allocate benefices, and that was a right he was keen to hang on to.
Whereas if they went back to France, Louis would probably be the one to shell them out. Or keep them as...
Yeah, especially if they've fallen out, and Louis's got no reason to be kind to the Pope.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we heard before, that if he was in a good mood, he would say, yeah, fine, you do it.
Yes.
But if they'd fallen out, there's no way he was going to let him do it. One of the cardinals, de Clermont, was arrested as he set off to go hunting. Julius either saw this hunting trip as a camouflage for escape to France, or it was convenient to say that's what he thought. Once he had him under lock and key, Julius claimed that de Clermont had wanted to shove Julius aside and put the purple slippers on himself. If he did or not, but that's...
Probably. Everybody else does.
He said he was lucky he didn't execute him. Nice papal talk there.
Yeah, forgiveness is divine.
Well, yeah, a couple of the other French cardinals had to beg Julius's forgiveness when letters they had written that were not terribly complimentary about the Pope were intercepted on the way to France.
Don't put it in writing, you ninnies.
No, because you're denying it, and then he says, what's this?
Yes.
Holds it up, and you think,
You signed this.
Yes. Well, none of this was going to please Louis, who'd probably have felt that the French cardinals were being unduly targeted. And this may have been the catalyst for the Great Council. But it soon spread to accusations that Julius had bought the papacy, which he probably had.
Yes.
But then he's hardly the first to do that. That he'd sold benefices,
Probably
which again,
had.
guilty as charged, yes, but common practice for a pope. And that he was guilty of infamous conduct.
Compared to who?
Well, unlike Alexander VI, these accusations weren't sexual. They concerned the little matter of it just didn't seem right for a pope to go to war against the King of France.
Really? That's what they're upset about?
Well, that's what the King of France is upset about.
Yeah, but I don't know.
Well, inconveniently, the way these things seem to work is that Louis had to ask Julius to summon a great council. And why Julius would summon a council whose sole aim was to oust him from the papacy,
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure. But as he failed to do this, Louis called upon Maximilian and all the other princes to call one. If the Pope won't do it, the others are allowed to, but I think the Pope has to get first dibs on it.
Right.
Meanwhile, Julius was in the north trying to keep the French at bay. He called some of the French cardinals he'd left in Rome, apart from de Clermont, who was still in prison. And it wasn't just the French ones, so at least a couple of Spaniards. And I don't know why he wanted them to come to him, except maybe he just wanted to know what they were up to. Keep them close.
But they don't know that.
Well, I suspect they do, because they did come north, but they had no intention of joining Julius.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
Well, they had been in contact with Louis, who arranged for them to be welcomed in Florence. And no doubt Florence, who, as we saw in Machiavelli's episode, mainly just wanted to keep their heads down, saying, yes, historically we side with France, but we don't really want to make a big thing of it.
No.
No doubt they were thinking, no, stay away, we don't want you.
I don't want to be involved. Let me out.
Yeah, God, we've got enough problems of our own. Well, these cardinals wrote to Ferdinand saying they were in fear for their lives. Julius, they said, intended to kill off all the cardinals who weren't Italian.
Oh, dear. Okay. Do we know how that rumor started?
I think it was a convenient rumour.
Ah.
One of these, isn't he awful?
Yeah.
Don't you think we ought to get rid of him?
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds pretty unlikely. And, in fact, Ferdinand agrees.
Oh, okay.
He said, sort of stuff and nonsense. Go back to the Pope, for goodness sake. You're talking rubbish. But they didn't. They went from Florence to Milan. So now they were safely in Louis territory. However, a message by them was intercepted by the Pope. Now he knew exactly what they and Louis had in mind.
Uh-oh.
I wouldn't have wanted to be the person who had to tell him that, because we know what he's like with servants when he's not in a good mood. Julius told the cardinals that if they came back to him, they could expect to be weighed down with honours and benefices.
Written on a gigantic rock on your chest.
I thought he was beginning to sound like the child catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Yes.
Yes, come here, you've got sweeties. I'll give you sweeties, and all free today. Yeah. He then told Louis to hand them over in fetters. So, yeah. Gloves off. I think I would take the honours and benefices with a pinch of salt. The cardinal's response was to tell Louis officially to declare war on the Pope and to summon him to the council. So I think that needs repeating. Cardinals of the papacy are telling a secular king to wage war on the Pope.
Yeah.
Julius may have been horrified at their behaviour, but they are doing exactly what he did to Alexander VI.
True, yeah.
He went to France to say to Charles,
you need to take on the Pope.
Let's oust Alexander, yeah. They claimed to have the support of other cardinals who hadn't done a runner with them, including Castellesi.
Oh.
But Castellesi was very quick to say, nope, not me. This is nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
It was quite a bit later than when Henry VII dobbed him in it with Alexander, if you remember, when he wrote that letter.
Yeah, I'm not going through this again.
So maybe he's being a bit more careful now. Maximilian's representative was at the council, but Maximilian himself was undecided what to do.
You know, the more we talk about popes and the state of the church, the more I am unsurprised that the Protestant movement starts.
Yes. Yes. Well, certainly we'll see little trigger points as we go along.
No kidding. This is ridiculous. If it was one pope, I could see everybody going, okay. But it's one pope after another.
Yes, you'd think, well, just write it out and we'll get a better one. But they're voting for these people.
Yeah.
But then again, they're being bribed to vote for these people.
True.
But then you shouldn't
they shouldn't be
able to, because you're meant to be Christians.
So wrong.
Oh. Well, I think it's quite good that we can still be shocked after, 3.5 years of doing this podcast.
Yeah. Well, I keep thinking that, okay, that's got to be the last bad person we talk about.
Nah.
It's sad.
We've got plenty more to come. Maximilian was undecided because he needed Louis to help with his war against Venice, but he needed Julius to get the Venetians to give him what he wanted in return for peace, which sounds like the two are contradicting each other. I think ideally he'd like to go to war with Venice, but we know what Maximilian's little foible is, and it's running out of money.
Not only that, is he still asking for his magic hat?
Well, I should think so.
Yeah, so he can't go against the
He doesn't
Pope.
get it, so he keeps asking, yeah. Julius had a lucky escape there, really, because Maximilian couldn't really be of any help to Louis with his great council that he was setting up. Ferdinand didn't want to. He didn't want to have anything to do with it, because since he'd just been given the investiture of Naples, he hardly going to rock the boat now. Henry VIII did as his father-in-law told him, so he wasn't going to have anything to do with it either. The King of Poland decided it was a bad idea, and the King of Denmark said, "What? What's going on? What's going on? What's happening?" Julius decided to be proactive, because Julius's family crest was the unbending oak. He'd got his plan, and now he was working on it, because that's how he did things. He'd wake up in the morning and think, "Oh, I know what we ought to do," and then he was out of bed and doing it. He would use a council to fight a council. He'd call a council of his own to reform the church, although obviously this one wouldn't have the outcome of ousting Julius, because, well, that would be awful if it did. And the council was planned to be held the following Easter. And this is a clever move on Julius's part. Since Louis's council had been called ostensibly because Julius had failed to call one,
now
once the Pope
Julius
did call one, yes, Louis was at best irrelevant, at worst maybe illegal, I'm not sure. And Julius wanted to strip the renegade cardinals of the cardinalship, but he'd need the agreement of other cardinals to do that, and they were none too keen.
No, because then it leaves them vulnerable to having their own cardinalship taken.
Yes. You only need the Pope to be in a bad mood, and that's you gone as well.
Yeah.
And you're in no position to say, well, that's not fair, because he'll say, well, you let the other ones go.
Yeah.
He threatened Louis with excommunication and the French bishops with severe penalties if they conducted this anti-Pope conference, which I felt was fair enough, really. They were Catholic bishops.
Yes.
I think he's quite within his rights to say, you're meant to be on my side. You might be French, but surely your Catholicism comes before your Frenchness.
Yes.
There's quite a few moments where I thought Julius was behaving quite acceptably, which surprised me, really. I wasn't expecting to agree with him on anything. But that wasn't the only thing on his to-do list. He still had the little problem of his vendetta with Ferrara. Obsessed with this Ferrara thing, isn't he? He wasn't well, and yet he was determined to set off to Ferrara to lead his army in person. Because he's the Pope, That's what I do as Pope. I lead an army. He was quite happy to drag himself out of his sick bed just to get back at him. And I've said he was often ill, but on this occasion it was very serious.
Oh.
Exacerbated, presumably, by this leading the troops to Ferrara and shouting at people, as he usually did when he was leading troops. He declined very quickly, and it was generally thought that he was dying. And he became so low that he told Cardinal Riario that he actually wanted to die.
Oh.
And certainly the rumour mills decided he was dying, and that the Orsini, backed by France, would take over Rome. The Venetian ambassador reported, quote, "The Pope is passing away. Cardinal de' Medici tells me he cannot live through the night. Medici is trying for the tiara, but it's thought that it will fall to one of the French party. This is a city in turmoil. Everyone is armed, unquote. The Pope prepared for death, and it's a bit like Henry VII, because he lifted the interdict on Ferrara and Bologna and forgave the Duke of Urbino, because the Duke of Urbino had retreated from, I think it was from Bologna, and the Pope was very cross about it. But anyway, he's forgiven now. Just like Henry forgave all the debts to all the people when he wasn't feeling very well. His Master of Ceremonies, and that's Paris de Grassis, wrote, I'll quote it in full since he was there, quote, I think I may close my diary here, for the Pope's life is coming to an end through his obstinacy in refusing to follow the advice of his physicians. He had commended his servants to Cardinal Raffaele Riario and given him 34,000 ducats to divide amongst them.
Oh, jeez.
But he has been hitting them with sticks all his time. He probably thought, this'll cover the insurance, I think. The compensation. After he had taken a little food, he seemed better. But on Monday the 25th, he refused all nourishment. He had a relapse, and his condition became hopeless. On Wednesday, there was still no change, and as he had eaten nothing for 4 days, everyone, including his physicians, gave him up.
Yeah.
The doors of his chamber were opened, and some of the people made their way to his bedside.
Which is also not going to make him think he can rally. You've got everybody treating you like a dying man.
Yeah, nearly gone now. Yes, I'm not dead.
She's close to dead.
He lay on his couch with closed eyes and seemed barely alive. Disturbances began in the city. Many outlaws returned. Confusion prevailed everywhere. All the public officials, even those in the courts of law, left their work. The governor of the city took refuge in the palace, and the minister of police in the Castel de Sant'Angelo.
I don't understand why that happens. Why does that happen?
Why does the minister of police hide in the castle
Well,
when he should be out policing?
the whole unrest thing. Why does that happen during a changeover in authority?
I suppose they're worried that if a French pope comes along, the Orsini are backed by the French. The Orsini Colonna thing will kick off.
So you riot?
Well, people like rioting.
Oh.
And if you riot properly, you come home with lots of lovely goodies, don't you? So, yes, you do.
Apparently, I don't riot properly.
No. Well, wait till there's a new pope, and then you can have a really good riot and see if you can do it better. Right, anyway, on with Paris de Grassis. The Sacred College met and desired me to make arrangements for the funeral obsequies and for the conclave. Then it occurred to the Pope's relations and servants to send for a very indulgent physician and suggest to him that he should give him permission to eat whatever he liked. I don't know why they couldn't give him permission.
Yeah.
Had to be a doctor. By agreeing to this, he succeeded in persuading his patient to consent to take some food. The Pope asked for peaches, nuts, plums and other fruits, which he chewed but did not swallow. And after that he had small onions, presumably pickled onions, and strawberries, which he likewise only chewed. But presently he swallowed several peaches and plums and fell into a light sleep. This state of things went on for 2 days, during which those who attended him alternately hoped and despaired. Great apprehension was felt for the future. Dangers of all sorts seemed to be hanging over our heads. Disturbances, war, and scarcity, unquote. So in fact it was Federico Gonzaga, Francesco Gonzaga and Isabella d'Este's son, who, if you remember, was being held as hostage by the Pope. It was him who made him eat.
Really?
And saved his life.
Of all people.
Yes. Well, we know that being a hostage doesn't mean you're in a dungeon. I mean, you could be part of the family, effectively, can't
Yes,
you?
very true.
Julius was asking for wine and olives and salted meat, and the doctors were saying this was highly inappropriate and wouldn't let him have it. And Federico Gonzaga just said, he's dying anyway. Let the man eat what he wants.
Yeah.
And so coaxed him back to life. And they could tell him he was feeling better since he told the doctors he wanted some bread dunked in a little wine. And when they brought him to him, he knocked back the wine and told them he could keep the bread. So... But it turns out that eating is actually quite good for you and stops you starving to death.
Yes. And gives you something to fight whatever is happening.
I'm not a physician, and I know that. His family rallied round him when he was ill, And that might have been natural family feeling, or it might have been that they knew what happened to the family of a pope once the pope had died.
Right.
They're probably saying, don't die, for God's sake, don't die. On the plus side, the thought that he might die had turned the people of Bologna back to favour him again, because such is the fickleness of the crowd.
Isn't that ridiculous? What was it? Queen Victoria was hated until she was all of a sudden going to get married.
Was she going to get married?
To Albert.
Oh, I thought you meant towards the end, when everyone thought, where is she?
Oh, no, I'm talking about when she first came to the throne and they
Yeah.
were making fun of her as being Mrs. Melbourne.
Oh, yeah. Julius suffered several other relapses, mainly because he found illness so frustrating he just wouldn't slow down or rest. The Venetian ambassador wrote, quote, "The Pope's constitution is marvellous. If only he would take care of himself, he would soon be able to get up," unquote. But even from his sickbed, he was issuing orders and sending missives to rulers all across Europe. And his recovery wasn't helped by his rages, which set him back quite a bit. He'd just be on the road to recovery and he'd get really annoyed with somebody and
Flip out.
that was it for another couple of days.
Oh, dear.
So this was great for the Pope, but a little worrying for all those who'd assumed he'd die and taken the opportunity to start campaigning to become Pope, or who'd raised a mob to make Rome a republic, or who'd decided to take over the city. Suddenly there was a lot of foot shuffling and not making eye contact. And, yeah.
Sorry,
and the Pope
sir.
might have been all lovely and forgiven everyone when he thought he was dying, but he wasn't dying anymore.
No. Did he demand his money back?
When he was after retribution, he started by excommunicating the rebel cardinals. So, right, that's it. You're out.
Wow. Doesn't he have to have approval from the other cardinals to excommunicate a cardinal? Or is that just something he has prerogative to do?
I'm not sure. Maybe they all agreed. Maybe he went from his sickbed. He said, "I'm thinking of excommunicating." No, they said, "Yes, fine, okay." Don't worry, he'll be gone by tomorrow.
You'll be gone by tomorrow, and then the other person will lift the excommunication. It's okay.
Yes. And then suddenly he's out of bed and you think, ooh,
Whoops.
never mind, it's not me. While the Pope had been ill, he'd grown a long beard. And when we get to Flaunt, we'll see the difference between the clean-shaven, rather thuggish-looking man and the bearded one who looks like an Old Testament prophet. There's a wonderful picture we'll look at later.
Well, I'd
by
imagine he's
Raphael.
also emaciated from not eating.
Yeah. He was able to get up and take Mass just before Christmas, so he's, getting better. And there were problems back in Rome, but not of the usual kind. Usually it was the Colonna versus the Orsini families. But now they're banded together against Julius. It's nice to find a common enemy, isn't it? You suddenly think, actually, we thought these people were bad, but he's even worse. He had had what I think was a very sensible policy, that apart from marrying his niece and daughter into the families, he'd not had any dealings with either of them, since he didn't want to be dependent on one and have the other one feeling miffed and rising up against him.
Good call.
So he hadn't made any of the Colonna or Orsini condottieri for the papacy.
Well, after hearing about the Orsini for a while, I don't think that's a bad thing. And vice versa.
Yeah, the Colonna were just as bad, I think. But they were a bit annoyed about this. They could see other families getting all the plum jobs.
Ah,
Louis got to hear about this and thought he might be able to make use of it.
of course.
And when they heard that Julius was dying, they thought now was the time to make their grievances heard, so the next pope would treat them better.
Uh-oh.
And when they heard that he'd made a recovery, they quietly left Rome and went home again.
Never happened.
He must have been a formidable character that people just think, actually, apparently he's got better.
Yeah.
I think we'll just go. Should we just go? Julius had been Pope for 8 years, and it had been quite a roller coaster, and it was about to get worse.
Oh.
When he went to Rimini, he found, stuck to the church door, a notification of the Council of Pisa. And this had been organised by Louis and was intended for all the cardinals and bishops who were dissatisfied with Julius's rule.
Uh-oh.
So the Great Council is about to have its first proper meeting. And we heard about this in Machiavelli's episode, because the people of Pisa were terrified of having it there.
Right.
And kept telling Louis, please have it somewhere else.
Right.
The last thing we need at the moment is to antagonise the Pope. But Louis wouldn't listen. And in fact, the number of people who were planning to go to the meeting in Pisa was so small it really hardly seemed worth it. Only 3 cardinals were going. And the officials who went ahead of the participants found that the whole thing was so unpopular in Pisa that no one would rent them any accommodation. So they had to take it by force, which obviously made them even less popular.
Oh, I thought they'd just leave.
No. And when the bishops and cardinals arrived, they were going to be accompanied by French troops. And Florence, who had Pisa at this time, well, Pisa didn't like being under Florence, but that was the situation, said that if they brought French troops, they would be seen as an enemy and would be attacked. When the council needed 2 Pisan citizens to witness the deed of constitution, they couldn't find anyone who'd sign it. Nobody in Pisa wanted to put their signature to this thing.
They go out and get a blind homeless man. Just sign here. I'll put your hand in the right place. What is it? Oh,
Yes.
It's just a request.
Yes.
And $1,000 will end up in your account by Friday.
Yes. Nevertheless, despite not getting these signatures, they declared they were the official general council, and they declared that any measures taken against them by Julius were null and void, because they were the official council.
Ooh.
They also made it a rule that no one could leave the council, which shows that they thought it was pretty likely that people would want to.
Yeah, once you're in, you're in.
Yes, so it's not an unmitigated success so far. But it was when a crowd gathered outside their meeting place and shouted, "Kill them!" that they decided it was probably time to leave.
Yeah.
Louis pretty much lost interest in it, and who can blame him, really? It was all seeming to be quite a bit more trouble than it was worth.
Oh my God, they're all toddlers.
Yeah, well, it had been a complete fiasco.
You get so excited about something and then you lose interest and wander off with it half in the way.
Yes. With someone behind saying, "Tidy up after you. Come on, pick that
Yep.
up."
Burchard.
Yes. Yeah.
You didn't walk right. You're supposed to stride out, not shuffle.
Yes, or skip. The Pope was asked to attend, either in person or via a representative, but he refused to acknowledge the council, because of course he didn't turn up. I mean, the council had turned out to be a damp squib anyway, and he had a council of his own, so there's no reason for him to turn up. But not only had Julius lost the papal states that he had managed to get back, but he was now losing his spiritual power. The rebel cardinals and priests who had attended the council were one thing, but the council had been backed by Louis and Maximilian. Maximilian had decided to side with them.
You didn't give him his magic crown.
You didn't give him his magic crown.
He might have sided with you if you had.
Well, luckily with Maximilian, next week it'll be something different. Well, they were waiting in the wings to depose Julius and to annihilate Venice. And without Venice, as we said last week, there was nothing to keep the French and Maximilian out of Italy. So really, Julius is in a hell of a situation.
Yeah.
He's probably still ill. I mean, he's always ill. And I was thinking, how many of them are ill at any one time? All these people. They've got syphilis, they've got gout.
They're older when
they've
they're
got malaria.
cardinals. Well,
It's,
if they'd gone through
I'm thinking
the right
about all the rulers and everything. But yeah, so many people are getting all this stuff done. Well, they must have been feeling lousy the whole time.
I wonder how much of the rages that we talk about is because they're in pain and there's no such thing as aspirin.
Yeah. Yeah. True. Well, Maximilian was even suggesting a schism. And you wonder how much of that's got to do with him. Perhaps someone said to him, "Look, you're not going to get to be Pope."
Wow.
Right, okay, well, I'll start my own church then. But he was talking about getting a break between the German church and Rome. He might not have actually been suggesting it, but the route he was planning could well have ended up that way. What must have galled Julius most was that he was mocked.
Ooh.
A pamphlet which had the backing of Louis said, quote, "The present Pope, who rigs himself out in martial attire and tries to pose as a warrior, but only looks like a monk dancing in spurs," unquote.
Ah.
He won't have liked that.
No.
Especially since he must have been thinking, actually, I don't actually win many of these battles, do I? Am I any good?
No, you're not.
Well, as we said, Maximilian changes sides pretty much daily. He then decided to have nothing to do with the council. He was warned off it by his rather more sensible daughter, Margaret of Austria, and by Abbot Trithemius, both of whom will have their own episodes soon.
Mm-hmm.
And Abbot Trithemius was Maximilian's spiritual advisor and demonologist.
Oh,
as we will
goodness.
find out. Everyone needs a demonologist.
Oh, yeah.
When Maximilian thought the Pope was dying, he apparently liaised with Adriano Castellesi, and this was the time when Maximilian sent Castellesi to Rome with instructions to make him Emperor-Pope. And in fact, this plan had gone further than I thought when we did the Castellesi episode. I thought it was a fleeting whim of Maximilian's, but he'd been in touch with Ferdinand to get his support. And we have a quote from Maximilian in a letter to Margaret, which really did make me think, oh, bless him.
Oh, dear.
Quote, I have sent an envoy to the King of Spain, asking him to support me, which he has willingly promised to do, on condition of my abdicating the imperial crown in favour of my grandson Charles, to which I cordially agree, unquote. You think, of course he did, Maximilian. It's his grandson as well.
Yes.
You're giving it up and handing it over to him, effectively. Don't trust him. He signed the letter, quote, written by the hand of your good father Maximilian, future Pope, unquote.
And he probably said that as he's writing, future Pope.
Yes. And he then added, quote, P.S. The Pope has had a return of fever. He cannot live much longer, unquote. Which doesn't sound like someone who's concerned with the Pope's health, does it? He might well have added, woohoo!
Yep, this will be easier than I expected if he goes.
Yeah.
It's a done deal.
Yeah, you just buy it. It's really easy.
Yeah. Can you give me the money?
Fuga? A letter he wrote to the Marshal of the Tyrol said that when he, Maximilian, had told Castellesi his plans, Castellesi had wept for joy. I think he just wept.
Yeah.
Because he realised he was going to be sent to Rome to try and make this plan sound sane.
Yeah.
He was thinking, oh God, I don't want to do it. Maximilian even planned to pledge some of his jewels and possessions, including the mantle of Charlemagne, which he said he wouldn't need when he was Pope.
Oh, dear.
So there you go. Yes, I really thought that he had just thought, oh, I'll be Pope. No, I won't. I'll go and do this.
Yeah, this sounds like something he thought about for quite a while.
Yes. And actually got other people, not to believe in, but to think, yeah, we can use this.
Yeah. Oh, that's uncomfortable.
Anyway, the rebellion had faltered before it had even really started. No one really believed these people had the interests of the church at heart, these rogue cardinals and Louis and Maximilian. Mostly it was personal ambition, people who wanted to become Pope themselves or had some reason to dislike Julius or were just following Louis's orders. It was all very secular, not very spiritual. But those rebel cardinals must have been kicking themselves because the Pope had won that one. Mm-hmm. He had the biggest council. It hadn't met yet, but it's got to be bigger than 3 cardinals and a dog, really, isn't it? Anyway, enough of religion. Back to war.
We're talking about the Pope. Enough of religion.
Yes, that's probably what he said. Right, I've had enough of religion. I'm going to war.
Yep.
Let's get the French out of Italy. Julius got back to making his new league. Spain, Rome and Venice this time. Maximilian and Henry were given the option of joining and when it suited them. Although Henry did join in November. The Swiss were allied on to invade Milan, then under French rule. But unfortunately the Swiss lost the element of surprise in their attack on Milan and were rebuffed by the French. But the Venetians took Brescia, but then lost it again a few days later. So not a unmitigated success again. The Orsini family were up to their old tricks again, and the Pope had to take refuge into the Castel Sant'Angelo. They're very lucky to have that building, I think. Whether this was in conjunction with Louis's other plans, the Orsini were very pro-French, as we've heard. I'm not sure. But, yeah, they were playing up. So, now was the time for Julius to get Bologna back off the French. And, again, Fiasco wouldn't be too strong a word to describe Julius' attempt to get Bologna back off the French. He was ready, but as usual he was thwarted by everyone else. The Spanish were late turning up, and then he got furious with his commander, Cardinal de' Medici, and put a box around that name, and kept telling him to do something. Just do something. Medici was very sensibly saying, surely it's better to wait for the Spanish troops to turn up. Then they could all attack together.
Yes.
But Julius might have been the warrior pope, but, as we've seen, he's not very good at it.
No.
And he has no sense of tactics or strategy. He's too impetuous.
When you give somebody the title of warrior pope, they should be good at it.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's more the peevish
No, he
pope.
just arrives and he says, right, come on, let's go. And everyone's saying, well, we're not ready.
Yes.
Well, you should be. Come on, we're going.
Nobody has a weapon.
No.
Grab a club.
There's only 3 of us here. Can we not wait for the others? And I'm not feeling well. Yeah, and also you think, why has he got a cardinal as a commander? Why has he got de' Medici commanding his army? Get a general.
Yes.
Don't use a cardinal. And it can't have been because he trusted the cardinals more than the generals, because he didn't. He was always convinced the commanders were cheating him, that they were keeping the money he provided.
They probably were.
They were selling off provisions. Yeah, it might have been. But, that helps morale if you've got the Pope constantly saying, I don't trust you. When the Spanish did turn up, they were foiled by the manoeuvres of Gaston de Foix, because he managed to get into the besieged city, Bologna, with all his troops, implying that the besieging wasn't quite watertight.
No. Somebody opened the door. Oh, hi. Come on in.
Yeah. Yes. That's all right if he comes through, is it? Okay, fine. Thank you. Yes, I think we've got a touch of Bodrugan
Yes.
hanging around outside. Julius felt that he was being let down on all sides. And he thought maybe they weren't just being let down. Maybe they were actively against him.
Maybe.
Yes, and probably are, actually. As we've heard, it got off to a good start for the French. De Foix attacked Ravenna and pretty much decimated the Spanish and Papal army in an extremely bloody battle. Cardinal de' Medici was taken prisoner, as I'm sure we'll come back to next season when he comes back as Pope Leo X.
Oh, dear.
Despite the death of de Foix on the battlefield, it only took the French a few days to take the whole of the Romagna, that big area of northern Italy previously occupied by Cesare Borgia. Julius panicked when he heard the news about Ravenna and thought about fleeing, which the Spanish envoy thought would be a very good idea.
Right. You could go to Ferdinand. He'll care for you.
Just go anywhere. Yes, just get out.
You'll have to give one of his sons a cardinalship in the Pope's hat, but it's okay. Sorry, grandsons.
Small price to pay for not being ripped to pieces by slavering French soldiers.
Yeah.
Or French cardinals. Or the Orsini. Or quite a few other people who seem to have it in for him.
Yeah.
Anyway, Julius was made of sterner stuff and soon got over his fright, and he started to organise rearmaments. And an envoy came back and said, well, don't worry, the French troops are thoroughly demoralised by the death of de Foix. It's all right. We've lies. We've lost the battle. We haven't lost the war. Yeah, it is lies. Since the victories that happened after Ravenna had happened under the leadership of Cardinal Sanseverino.
Oh, another cardinal. Jeez.
Another cardinal, but on the French side. And a good one, it seems, as far as military is concerned.
This should be called the Cardinal War.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you've got cardinals fighting cardinals. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the French seem to come to terms with the death of Gaston de Foix remarkably quickly, really. They just seem to think, OK, onward. But it does show how combatants will cling on to any bit of good news if the whole thing's a disaster. Julius had to enter into peace negotiations with the French. But he himself admitted that he was only playing for time. Not to the French, obviously, he didn't admit that to them. He certainly didn't want peace with France at this time because he would have to pay the highest price for it. I mean, you don't want to try and sue for peace just when you've lost a disastrous battle because you've got nothing to negotiate with. The French victory gave a new lease of life to the rebel cardinals, and they announced that the Pope had renounced his powers, which now lay with the Great Council.
What?
Again, lying.
Yeah.
Yeah. But all this posturing was for nothing, since Louis admitted he'd no interest in the Great Council. He just kept tugging its leash now and again to keep the Pope on his toes. It's personal. Louis doesn't want to reform the papacy. He just doesn't like Julius. You assume it's political.
Yes. No.
Doesn't seem to be. Or you assume that if somebody wants to start a council to reform the papacy, well, that must be spiritual.
No.
No, I just don't like him. I just don't like him. In June 1511, the Pope was back in Rome, and his Master of Ceremonies, Paris de Gracis, wrote, quote, "This was the end of our toilsome and useless expedition," unquote.
Ooh.
And he wasn't wrong, because if you look at what the Pope had at the end, he was in a much worse position. The Venetian and papal troops were effectively non-existent, and there was nothing to stop Louis and Maximilian now. They could walk in and take the lot.
Oh, dear.
And there was terrible fear in Rome that France would march on them. Julius had galleys ready to take him to safety, which is nice. I mean, don't protect the whole city, just look after number one, why don't you? But instead, as we found, he thinks, OK, I need to get away. No, I'm not going to get away, should I? No, I'm going to start a Holy League, and I'm going to call it the Very Holy League this time, to differentiate it from the just ordinarily Holy League from the last one. I mean, he wasn't going to be beaten. His cardinals were just saying, oh, come on, enough's enough, just let it go. But
next one's the penultimate Holy League, then the ultimate Holy League, then the Universal Holy League.
And the bestest Holy League. Yeah. And yet Louis didn't do it. He didn't attack Rome. He did a Hannibal, actually, because Hannibal could have attacked Rome, couldn't he? He didn't do it. It may have been the enormity of deposing the Pope again. Perhaps he thought, I mean, this seems a bit much, doesn't it?
Yeah, should we?
Attacking Rome.
Really?
Instead, he sought peace with Julius, and his stipulation was that Julius should forgive the priests and cardinals who turned against him, and if he did that, Louis would forget the idea of the Great Council.
After all this, back to status quo.
Yeah, it wasn't a great loss for him because he'd already lost interest in it, so it's quite easy for him to let it go.
Yeah.
But yeah, several of the cardinals went back to the Pope's side, including Cardinal d'Este, who was one of the rebels, who was Lucretia Borgia's syphilitic brother-in-law.
Yes.
All these shenanigans meant that Julius had to put off his plan for his own council, known as the Lateran Council. This Lateran Council was a landmark in church history, and it may have been convened to get back at Louis and put a stop to the Great Council, but in the end it went much further than that.
Really?
Well, often these great schemes have rather grubby beginnings, don't they? And this one certainly has.
Yeah, I'm just surprised he would let them do anything.
Well, he's not averse to reforming the church, because we heard when he first became Pope that he was keen that any ecclesiasticals that committed a crime should pay for their crime. Mm-hmm. And he was full of good ideas of reforming the church. I mean, don't reform the Pope, because I'm the Pope.
But the church, of course.
The church in general, yeah. Their policies were to reform the church, root out schismatics, and to fight the infidel, of course.
Way to aim small and doable.
Well, on the 3rd of May, the council finally met, and there was the Pope, 16 cardinals, 70 bishops, 12 patriarchs, and 3 generals of religious orders. And there were representatives from Spain, Venice, and Florence, and there were Roman senators and nobles, and the council was guarded by the Knights of St. John, shipped over from Rhodes. And how many did Louis have at his great council?
3.
Something like that. Yes. Oh, the Pope must have loved that, mustn't it? As everyone was filing in, he must have thought,
yeah, this is a council.
Call that a council? Nah. The opening address said that it had been God's will that the Allies lost Ravenna. Now they would have to knuckle down and concentrate on the weapons God had given them: piety, prayer, and faith. God had told the Pope to summon the council and to bring peace. Maybe the warrior Pope had come to the same opinion about his fighting prowess that we'd come to. He also promised to give Paris de Gracis a bishopric. for the way he'd organised everything.
Oh.
And it never occurred to Alexander to give Burchard a bishopric, as far as I know.
No.
It did seem an odd reason for giving someone a bishopric. Well done, you organised it
Yes.
beautifully. Yeah, it reminded me of sort of Women's Institute meeting. I would like to thank Mrs. Prothero for organising it and for the lovely scones. The address said, quote, "He manifests the power of God when he girds himself with his own sword, for he possesses 2 swords, one which he shares with temporal princes and another which is reserved to him only. This latter is the sword of spiritual power for the destruction of errors and schisms. The power of the Pope should be combined with the image of the divine perfection, which consists in loving kindness, to which must be added wisdom, and this wisdom is specially displayed in the calling of the present council," unquote. Which sounds to me as if everyone's saying to Julius, look, you're the Pope. Take off the armour and get back to some good old-fashioned poping.
Yeah. Call the orgy.
You don't hear much about that with Julius. Nope. Well, this has always been seen as a real attempt to reform the church. But would he have formed the council at all if it hadn't been for the one in Pisa? I very much doubt it. All he's saying really is, look, I can do this too, and mine's bigger. Things were not going as well for the French. Ferdinand and Henry VIII declared their intention of fighting the French on their own territory, and by June, Julius had gathered a force of Venetians and Swiss mercenaries, another one to replace the ones that had died horribly in Ravenna. And this just goes to show that he hadn't listened to the opening address of the Lateral Council at all. Just the news of this, amazingly, was enough to send the French into retreat.
Really?
Maximilian, although he didn't side with the Pope, withdrew his forces from the French. And might have been a financial thing, it usually was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There were the papal troops under the forgiven Duke of Urbino. Spanish, Venetians and Swiss lined up against them in Italy. And the French obviously couldn't call on reinforcements from France because England and Spain were on their way.
Ah.
So it's probably quite pragmatic for Louis to think, we can't do it, can we?
Nope.
We just can't do it. But I'm not sure they needed to worry over much about England because, if you remember, the Marquis of Dorset, Thomas Grey,
Yes.
was sent to Spain where he bickered with Ferdinand.
Right.
More than half the men died of disease, and then they came home in disgrace.
Oh, goodness.
That was the English contribution for that bit.
Yeah, not very good.
The Navy was doing a bit better. The English and French fleets met off Brest in Brittany.
Oh.
The English had 25 ships, including the Sovereign, commanded by Charles Brandon, and the Regent. And those were the ships that had been conducting the illicit alum trade under Henry VII.
So they were well used to going that route.
Well, not for a while, because Henry VIII didn't want anything to do with it, did they? But
Yeah, what an idiot.
yes. But a very moral idiot.
You like to spend money, but you don't want the income. Good job.
You don't want to bother making it.
I'm not going to enjoy next season. No, I will, because we only have one episode on Henry VIII. We're not going to be doing a whole lot on him. He's my least favourite English king, believe it or not.
I want to go into it completely open-minded, which I could do with Henry VII because I didn't know anything about him.
Yeah.
I still don't really. I'm still confused by him.
Yeah.
But the trouble is with Henry VIII, you've got so much baggage to go in with it, haven't you?
Horrible man.
Yeah. The French retreated, apart from the Cordelier, which was grappled by the Regent, but then the gunpowder magazine of the Cordelier blew up, taking both ships with it.
Ooh.
So that must have been a hell of an explosion.
No kidding.
So the French, seeing the writing on the wall, retreated from Italy, giving Cardinal de' Medici a chance to escape. Genoa, Julius's native city, or near enough, became independent. Rimini, Cesena and Ravenna became papal states once more. And in June, the Duke of Urbino managed to stop all that talk about how he retreated by actually taking Bologna. And then Ottaviano Sforza rode into Milan as the Pope's lieutenant. And Ottaviano Sforza was the illegitimate son of Galeazzo Maria Sforza, the man who fed a whole hare to a poacher. just to put him in context. Sir Louis had lost everything.
Everything.
Even Asti, which belonged to his own family.
Ooh.
So much for ousting the Pope. And this cheered Julius up no end.
No kidding.
He turned to his master of ceremonies, Paris de Gracis, and said, "We've won, Paris, we've won." Apparently he read the letter giving him the news again and again. No doubt he did the little dance in his nightshirt as well.
Yep.
He wasn't at all well, but he insisted on being carried to church so he could give thanks. I was thinking they all seem to do a lot better when the Pope stops trying to lead the army.
Yes.
And goes back to Rome. And they do best when he's confined to bed.
Yes.
That's ideal.
Yeah.
And it really does seem like that. Every time he sets off, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
And then he goes home again, and suddenly it's all sort of...
Because somebody competent gets in charge.
Yes. Somebody who doesn't just say, "Right, I'm here, let's go." The whole city erupted with cannon fire and fireworks, in celebration this time, not because they're all fighting each other. The Orsini had been left in an interesting position, though. And we've still got Ferrara to consider. Maximilian had joined in to push France out of Italy. But he was not at all pleased to find that he'd just replaced France with the Pope. I mean, the Pope had taken all the things that France had, and Maximilian had been thinking, what about nobody
me?
seems to have given me anything. So Julius had cozied up to Maximilian in a sort of safety in numbers type way. I did wonder about this magic crown, though. I mean, Maximilian must have been going on about it all the time, wasn't he? Saying, yeah, but I still want my crown.
Yeah.
Julius also needed him on board for the Lateran Council, because the other European princes were on board. Spain, Portugal, England, Scotland, Hungary, Norway, and Denmark.
Ooh.
It was only France which was entirely isolated. And it would be interesting to know what the French people thought of the king who'd got them into that mess, I think. The Pope was magnanimous, except when a contingency from Bologna turned up and said they were very, very sorry, now that they no longer had the French bodyguards. They told him that they understood he was a tad miffed about the whole thing, but that they'd had an awful year, and could he find it in his heart not to make it worse, please?
Nope.
Well, Julius's speech to them was long and emphasised cost rather a lot. He had twice gone to Bologna with his court, which was very expensive. And Bologna, he reckoned, had done very well out of this, from feeding and accommodating everybody. And he'd heard that they had pulled down a statue of him, which he'd put up at his own expense, and that Alfonso d'Este had melted it down and built a cannon out of it called La Giulia. And he was particularly furious about that, and I bet that's what really niggled him about Alfonso d'Este.
It is pretty cheeky.
But then again, I mean, he went to Bologna and put up a statue to himself. I mean, I think he had it coming. He took all their privileges away. He said they couldn't be trusted to govern themselves, and he was going to introduce a form of government that would make damn sure they behaved themselves in future. I felt very sorry for Bologna.
I feel sorry for everyone in Italy.
Well, they, in particular them, because they'd lived under a tyrant, Bentivoglio.
Yeah.
The Pope had arrived to rid them of the tyrant.
And then became his own tyrant.
Yes, he put somebody else in his place who also became a tyrant. Then they were attacked by the French. They were retaken by the Duke of Urbino, attacked by the French again, finally besieged by the Spanish and the Papal troops. And then they had to come to the Pope and say that they were very, very sorry for incurring his expenses. Yeah, too right, it had been an awful year. Sounds horrendous.
Yeah.
And not fair, I didn't
No.
think.
I honestly am surprised that Italy isn't completely depopulated by now.
What with disease and war. The Pope himself chaired the next meeting of the Lateran Council, so it must have been very pleasant for him to be able to sit there and listen to the apostolic notary giving the address, quote, "Julius II in a most just war against an enemy far stronger than himself, had personally undergone the extreme heats and cold, all sorts of fatigues, sleepless nights, sickness, and even danger of death, without flinching. At his own expense, with unexampled generosity, he had equipped an army, liberated Bologna, driven the enemy, the French, out of Italy, subdued Reggio, Parma, and Piacenza, brought joy and peace to his country, and earned himself an immortal name. Still greater was the glory that awaited him at this present time in the works of peace, the reform and exaltation of the Church, which was groaning under so many evils and threatened by traitors within and enemies without, which had brought up children who despised her, and had so often poured forth her complaint in mournful chants, but now raised her eyes full of joy and hope to the bridegroom who had delivered her. The Pope would be her physician, pilot, husbandman, in short, her all in all, almost as though God were on earth again. Unquote.
What a load.
Well, it's so complimentary about him, I wondered if he'd written it himself.
Yeah.
Then Alfonso of Ferrara turned up. He'd been left in the lurch by the French. And Francesco Gonzaga, Isabella d'Este's husband, arranged for safe passage for Alfonso. Julius met him with hugs and sweets and wine and big plates of fruit.
Okay.
That does seem a little odd, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Here, have an apple. Not bad for someone who'd been enemy number one of the papacy.
Yeah. Unless they're poison apples, a la Snow White.
Oh, yes. Well, a commission of 6 cardinals, including Christopher Bainbridge, was set up to examine Alfonso's case. They insisted on 2 conditions that Alfonso didn't think he could accept. One was the release from prison of his brothers. And if you recall from Lucretia Borgia's episode, he'd imprisoned when one had blinded the other after he stole his girlfriend, and then it sort of escalated from there. Well, Alfonso said he couldn't agree to that, and he certainly couldn't agree to the Pope's next demand. Julius had said, oh, just one more thing, I want Ferrara. Alfonso crept out of Rome under the cover of darkness and made his way back to Ferrara, the pretty way. And Julius was very affronted and said he would never have violated the terms of his safe passage.
Liar.
Julius, we've heard, is a very truthful man.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then we also heard it's quite useful to be truthful most of the time if you're going to lie through your teeth once or twice.
Yes.
Ferdinand of Aragon had had enough of Julius. I think everybody has. The Pope had continued to berate him about the poor showing of the Spanish troops at the Battle of Ravenna. And he'd heard rumours that having got rid of the French, Julius now wanted to get the Spanish out of Italy, which he almost certainly did. I mean, why wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Julius's to-do list was extensive, as we've heard. Everybody's to-do list is extensive. But he'd never really recovered from his last bout of fever. He just got better at hiding it, I think.
Oh.
He so exhausted himself conducting Vespers during Pentecost in 1512 that he told his master of ceremonies that he wouldn't conduct any more services from now on. Wow. He made a pilgrimage, which brought on another attack of fever. It seems to have affected his mind, too. For a while, he hardly stayed in the same place 2 nights running.
Oh.
He seemed to be trying to escape a constant feeling of distress.
So he's paranoid.
Well, becoming all modern and psychological about it, I was thinking anxiety, that sort of flight instinct brought on by anxiety. So constantly thinking, I can't stay here, I need to move on.
Yeah.
He was convinced he wouldn't live much longer. By Christmas, he didn't leave his bed. He couldn't sleep. He didn't want to eat anything. The fever had gone by then, but the doctors couldn't work out what was wrong with him.
Is it malaria, do we think?
Could be, because it's a reoccurring thing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So, could well be. He was persecuted by fears of the Spanish, the Swiss, Venice, everybody. Mind you, everybody was against him.
Pretty much everybody had it.
He carried on working from his bed, conducting meetings and issuing orders, but he was sure he was dying. He told the Master of Ceremonies what sort of funeral he wanted. Nothing too showy, but something a bit decorous. I wondered if he had in mind what happened to Pope Alexander at his funeral. Because if you remembered, everyone deserted the cortege and ran off with the candles.
Right.
And it was up to a few workmen at the church just to stuff him in his coffin and get him underground. The next day, the master of ceremonies came to him and found him perfectly well.
Oh.
And Julius told him, quote, "Yesterday I was near dying. Today I'm well again," unquote. But it was only a brief reprieve. He called his cardinals together and told them that he'd been a great sinner and had not run the church as he ought to have done.
And all the cardinals are saying, well, yeah, we've been telling you this for months.
Well, no, because he got better last time. They're probably saying, no, you've done a wonderful job. Yes, keep saying that. It's because I have it getting better. I don't think we could read too much into it. I think it's probably one of these tropes, isn't it? Oh, I've done a terrible job. I write awful books. Don't read them, that sort of thing. He said that as a man, he forgave the schismatic cardinals, but as a pope, if they think they can be in the conclave to elect the next pope, they've got another thing coming. I thought you needed all the cardinals to elect a pope. But anyway. His daughter Felice was there, and she asked for something for her half-brother, but Julius virtuously said that he wasn't going to give away stuff to his family, which was probably a dig at Pope Innocent, who wanted to give away all the papal riches to his family, as we saw at the beginning.
Right. I'd forgotten that.
Yeah. Everyone was in tears, all the cardinals and Julius himself. And he was given a solution of gold to drink, which we came across in Lucretia Borgia's episode when her father-in-law, Ercole d'Este, was given gold as his great panacea. And then he promptly died. And it had the same effect on Julius. During the night, November the 20th, 1513, he passed away. And he was buried next to Uncle Sixtus in St. Peter's. And there was great mourning in Rome.
Was there?
Well, yeah, but plenty of people commented that no one had shown him much affection when he'd been alive. But you often get that, don't you, with politicians that people have hated all their lives.
Yeah.
And then say he was a fine and noble man. Although one Venetian commentator said, quote, "Would to God he'd died 5 years ago."
You get one honest person.
Yeah, for the good of Christianity and of this republic and poor Italy, unquote.
Yeah.
The historian Guicciardini said of him that he, quote, "preserved nothing of the Pope about him but the robes and the name," unquote.
Ooh.
He went on to say, quote, "certainly worthy of great glory had he been secular prince," unquote. And maybe that was it all along. He couldn't be Prince of Genoa as he wanted to be, but he so wanted to run things and go to war. So perhaps he thought, wow, I'll become Pope and do it then. Just somebody let me go to war. And maybe he was more religious than we have felt, because we can read in the diaries of Paris de Gracis that he heard Mass every day when his health allowed, and he took his role as spiritual leader very seriously. And he did publish papal bulls about simony. Simony had been rampant under Alexander.
Right.
I think Julius was very keen to distance himself from anything that Alexander had done. And the simony bull went beyond the church. It ordained that intermediaries and agents, whether lay or clerical, and whatever their ranks, whether prelates, archbishops or bishops or envoys of kings or states, which are implicated in a simoniacal election, are to be deprived of their dignities and their goods confiscated.
Oh. Did he follow through with that? Like, did it take hold?
I don't know whether he did actually take away someone's dignities, but I can't believe, all those promises he made to get himself Pope, I can't believe there wasn't a few promises of offices in that. Obviously, he had some interest in the conversion of the Americas. In 1504, he created an archbishopric and 2 bishoprics in Haiti. But Ferdinand kept putting obstacles in the way, and it wasn't until 1512 that the bishops took up the post.
Is that because Ferdinand was getting the money, but if the bishops took their positions, they would get money?
Could be. My thinking was, if you've got bishops, you get conversions, and you can't enslave converted Christians.
Ooh, that's harsh.
I don't know. I might be maligning him, but
I sort of doubt it.
Julius also arranged for missionaries to be sent out to places the Portuguese had acquired, like India, Ethiopia, Congo. for which I'm sure they were truly grateful. Yeah. In England, Julius II took measures for remedying the abuses connected with the ecclesiastical immunities. So I presume that England was particularly bad at letting their clergy off various things. And he said, no, if you've done wrong, you've done wrong. We've said that the words warrior pope shouldn't go together, but that may be because we're seeing it from a 21st century perspective. Although...
It didn't sound like anybody at that time was happy about it.
No, and we still got this thing about, thou shalt not kill.
Yes.
It's easy. It's easy.
Yeah.
But a medieval Renaissance pope had two roles, and one was spiritual, looking after the souls of his flock, and the other was unashamedly temporal, looking after his lands and making sure they stayed his lands. So if that involves literally battling to keep them, so be it.
Yeah.
We saw in the Patsy Revolution episode that even the relatively saintly Pope Sixtus was not above arranging to have inconvenient people like Lorenzo the Magnificent bumped off.
Yeah.
The Pope had to be a politician, and in 15th century Italy that meant using some very unchristian methods.
Yeah.
And Julius wasn't the attacker. He was getting his lands back, not trying to increase his lands into territories that the church hadn't owned, except maybe when he went into that alliance with Ferdinand, Maximilian and Louis to divide out Venice between them. But he hadn't actually wanted to do that. He'd given the Venetians several opportunities to compromise, and they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And in the end, he accepted the compromise that they did come to, and the dividing came to nothing. And that was sort of because of the Pope saying, just all you have to do is say sorry and give me back my towns. That's all I want.
Please.
For the rest of it, most people of the day might well have seen it as a religious duty. In fact, people might have thought worse of him if he'd let the papal states slip through the church's fingers. And one of the people at the Council of Basel said, quote, I used to agree with those who thought it would be better if the church were deprived of all temporal power. Now, however, I found out that virtue without power will only be mocked, unquote. Yeah, many thought that by expelling the French, Julius had saved the church, or at least the church in Rome. But also quite a lot of people thought, why does he have to go and do it himself?
Yeah,
though?
you get other people to do that. You hire generals.
Yes.
You go get Cesare.
Yes. Yes. Well, I think that's the main sticking point. It's not the fact it was being done, it was the fact he was doing it. He
personally was doing it.
Yeah. But then if he hadn't done it, and no one else can do it properly.
Yeah, but every time he left, things went right.
Yes, but he wouldn't have seen it like that. He was probably just thinking, come on, let's get on with it. What's wrong with you people? Why are you slacking?
Probably.
Well, we're all dead, sir.
We're all dead.
Well, before we rate him, we need to clear up a couple of issues.
Okay.
Did Pope Julius forge the letter from Sultan Bajazet telling Pope Alexander to kill Prince Jem?
Ooh.
And on a more general level, was Julius responsible for the bad reputation that Pope Alexander has now? And to the first question, I have to say I don't know. I couldn't find out any more information about it. I spent ages on that, actually.
Yeah.
I really wanted to know. And I couldn't find anything coming at it from Prince Jem's side or Alexander's side.
Has anybody actually looked into it? Or is it just one of those things that somebody said and nobody's had time or the inclination to...
Maybe.
I wonder if the document still exists and you could test it. Like, oh, this paper came from... Definitely not anywhere in the Ottoman Empire. It came from, 2 blocks that way. It has a watermark.
That says, this is Julius II's notepaper.
Yes.
I don't know. But as for Julius being responsible for Alexander's reputation, he may well have exacerbated it.
Oh.
But he wasn't alone and he wasn't the first.
Okay.
There's a letter from Pope Pius admonishing Borgia for his behaviour at a christening party in Siena, in which allegedly women were admitted but not their menfolk. At a christening party.
Oh, gosh.
He's incorrigible. And there was a later letter from Pius admitting that the rumours he'd heard might have been exaggerated. He didn't say they were wrong. He said they were exaggerated, and accepted Borgia's apology. Borgia was a cardinal and vice-chancellor at this time, but it shows that his behaviour amongst women was already being talked about. It's not just coming from Julius.
Well, also, we've got Isabella. I can't see that she knew him personally. So she would have witnessed. Yeah.
I mean, pretty little sins.
Yeah. But they weren't so pretty when it came to it. She was not impressed.
The rumour that Alexander's long-term lover, Vanozza, was a courtesan came before Julius had any reason to badmouth Borgia. Because you remember, initially they got on.
Yes.
Before there was any reason to feel envy for one or the other.
Yeah.
They got on all right. Julius may have made the most of the rumours about the Borgias, but the rumours were already there. He didn't make them up. Or at least he didn't make them all up.
Mm-hmm.
But I do remember reading somewhere, and annoyingly, I can't remember where, that Julius had Alexander's servants tortured to make them dish the dirt on the Borgias.
Oh, goodness.
But that wasn't in any of the books I read about Julius. Certainly not in the hagiographical one I read about it. But
that's just it. We come across so much more as we keep digging into other people, because they talk about letters that they've seen and they can reference them, and you think, why was that not in the actual book about him?
A book about the person.
Yes.
Yeah. Throughout Julius's entire papacy, his mission had been to strengthen the church by consolidating the papal states with his papal armies and allies, and adding to its magnificence through artistic patronage. And yet he weakened the church by his unholy militariness and his worldliness, selling indulgences to fund the rebuilding of St. Peter's, which so incensed Luther, as we heard about in Fugger's episode, that it ultimately caused a schism within Christianity. I don't think we can blame Julius alone for the split in the church, but it did happen under his and Leo X's watch.
Yes. They didn't do enough to stop it, so it kind of does become their issue. Yes.
Yeah, the business of selling the indulgences, that was what really toppled even, which really toppled Luther into saying, right, that's enough. I can't take it any longer.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've talked about him for about 7 hours or so.
Yeah.
How do we rate him?
Yes.
Manfully.
I think there's a difference between intrigue and planning.
Agreed.
He didn't have time to intrigue because with him it was, this is what we'll do, now let's get on with it. But his holy leagues the intention of them were always to include and to exclude. And that could be seen to be amphibolizing.
I don't know, because everybody was doing that, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's part of politics, isn't it?
Yes. You have to do an us and them in order to get any factions and strength.
Yeah, and we were told he spoke quite plainly. He
Yes.
wasn't a dissimulator. He just said what he thought. And
But he did have to do some sort of intriguing to become the Pope. You didn't become the Pope because you were a good person.
Yeah. But he did say he knew he couldn't dissimulate because he said once, quote, "It will kill me if I don't let it out," unquote. He just couldn't not say things.
Yeah.
So I don't think he was a very good intriguer if you're thinking, oh, they don't know that I know such and such.
No, everybody knows.
I've got to tell them. I've got to tell them.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's the Tom Holland of the popes.
Tom Holland.
Tom Holland from Spider-Man.
Oh, right. I was just checking because there's Tom Holland the actor and Tom Holland the historian.
Tom Holland the actor, they don't tell him the ending of any of the movies because he spoils everything. He can't keep it to himself.
Oh, right. Oh.
There's actually a video of him reading something out, and on the back of it says, "Not for public dissemination."
Right.
Yeah, it's almost, it can't be zero because he had to do something to get on the papal throne.
Well, yes, we know he promised so many people so many things that he couldn't fulfill, 1/10 of the promises he made.
Yeah.
And that's amphibly. That's telling people that what they want to hear.
Yeah, it wasn't so bad that he was tearing down somebody else to put himself in front, though. It was mostly money, wasn't it? I don't remember him.
Well, it said promises. He'd made promises to people. Now, promises presumably partly money, maybe you can have such and such a post. Yeah. You can have this land. But he couldn't fulfill it.
2?
Yeah. I might go for 3 just because 2 sounds a bit saintly, doesn't it? And he doesn't fall into that category.
Okay, so that's 5.
Antiperistasis.
Because he does get all the way to Pope.
He gets to Pope. Yes. And he's the most unlikely Pope because he brought the French into Italy.
During Alexander's time.
Yes.
Yes.
And set this whole thing in motion, this Italian wars in motion. And you say, why did you elect him Pope? Because he's just done something terrible. And you can already see the implications of this.
Yeah.
Why are you still electing him Pope? Surely you should be drumming him out of Rome.
Yeah.
So I feel for that alone, it's got to be quite high because he's got in a position that he really has no right to be in.
Yes. How did he convince people? I don't care how much money you promised them. How did you convince them that you were going to be... I don't know.
And he was elected pretty much unanimously.
Yeah.
And very quickly, the fastest election before or since. So, I mean, that's quite...
And he got to Pope.
Pope, yeah. I mean, you can't get any higher in the church, can you?
No, but he wouldn't have started off as a pauper.
No, I'm looking more on the idea that not so much his financial or social aspect, more the fact that he had done something pretty awful and he was still elected Pope. It's just, I find that's quite extraordinary, even more than climbing up the social ladder.
Yeah, but at the same time, they did just have Alexander. It's not like they picked good popes prior to him.
Oh, well, they did pick a good pope prior to him, but unfortunately he only lasted about a month, didn't he? So,
yeah, but they picked him as a stopgap measure.
They did, yes, very much so.
He is a deliberate stopgap. I can't give him that high of marks. Because antiperistasis is supposed to be about huge changes in life.
Yeah.
And he was already able to become a bishop and then cardinal, etc., etc., etc.
And also he became cardinal because his uncle was pope.
Yes, which doesn't say he fought.
I mean, that's an easy route up.
Yeah.
But I want to give him some money. I don't want to give him any money. I want to give him some points for getting there under the most extraordinary conditions.
Yeah. I'll give him a 4 because he's basically a traitor and still became pope. That is an 8 for antiperistasis.
Martyrdom.
He put himself in the firing line, literally. I mean, they couldn't get him out of it, could they?
Yes.
In fact, they put him in his own firing line with his own troops saying, he's over here, shoot at him and he might go away.
Yeah.
We're fed up with him. He keeps shouting at us.
Yeah, and for a pope, that is massive.
It is.
Was there any warrior popes before him? Or no, because he's the first warrior pope.
I don't know. I don't know enough about early medieval popes.
Hold on. I'm just going to quickly Google it then.
But I don't really see it as martyrdom if you're so desperate to go to war that you will go to war even though you're pope. Not because you're pope, but despite being pope.
Right. It looks like John the 10th and Benedict the 8th really are the only two, but they weren't really, they didn't lead troops, it looks like. So, yeah, he's basically the only...
First.
But that's coming off of Reddit, which usually is pretty good. So, yeah, I'm going to go with the warrior pope thing. The fact that he was a traitor. And
I think, yes, he put himself in the firing line, but he wanted to. It's not something he had to do.
yeah. And the traitor thing, I'm thinking we have to put in there because when he's asking for France to come in, wouldn't you think at that point he would be sacrificing his ability to become pope? He might have thought that, okay, I won't be pope, or I'm not even going to try for it. We need France in here. That might be something that could be considered martyrdom. It's not his life, but it's his career. I'm going to give him a 6 because he did put himself in battle. And he probably thought he was giving up the possibility of being a pope. 6 is decent.
Yeah, I think I'll go for 5 because he put himself in battle because he really wanted to.
Okay.
In fact, I don't think he could not do it. He was so keen on it.
Yeah.
B team.
He brought in the Swiss Guard as the Pope's personal bodyguards, because we looked into that before, so that's something. He was a great patron of the arts. St. Peter's. Bramante was his pet architect, so he got him onto St. Peter's. Michelangelo's the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel.
Oh goodness, that's massive.
Raphael's frescoes in the Stanze, which we'll look at in a minute, and he enlarged the Vatican Palace.
I mean, of all papal art, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel is the most famous. Hands down.
He also collected stuff. He collected classical art. He's got Apollo, he's got Laocoon. I never know how to pronounce that. And that's that rather disturbing sculpture of the naked priest trying to save his sons from being attacked by serpents.
Right, the naked priest who shouldn't have had sons. That's always been my question about that one.
Yes. Well, presumably he's a pagan priest, so maybe...
Oh.
Maybe you're right. The reclining Ariadne, lots and lots he collected. If he heard of any ancient sculptures being discovered, he was on it like a shot.
Right.
1505, he invited Michelangelo to Rome, having been very impressed by his Pietà. And quite a clash of forceful egos there.
Yes, there's a movie about it from the golden age of Hollywood.
Oh, is that The Agony and the Ecstasy?
Is it?
Is that
I
one?
don't remember. Yes. From 1965. Is that the one I'm thinking of?
Sounds about right at the time.
Yes, that's the one. Agony and the Ecstasy.
The first thing Julius set him to do was his own tomb. Julius's tomb, obviously, not Michelangelo's. Then they fell out when the Pope owed Michelangelo money and then refused him an audience when he came to collect his wages. But I think we will probably do an episode on the Italian Renaissance, so we won't go into that too much. The tomb was never finished, actually. And, of course, his bronze statue was destroyed and turned into a cannon. So, and we have an extraordinary picture of him by Raphael that we'll look at in a minute. But, yeah, the Sistine Chapel bumps up his team pretty well, I think.
Yeah.
If you go to Rome, near the Vatican, you'll find a straight boulevard called the Via Julia. And this was commissioned by Julius. And it was the first attempt to change the layout of Rome. And it ploughed through all the sort of maze-like lanes and alleys, a bit like after the Great Fire of London. And this started a big binge on humanist architecture. So if you're looking at Renaissance Rome, really you're looking at a city envisioned and partially carried out by Julius and those who were inspired by what he'd done that came later. So when you think how Rome had declined over the years, because it was quite a dump, he made a big difference to the city.
Yeah, where wolves were roaming.
And Raphael's Room of Liberations is quite an eye-opener, because on the north wall is a mural of St. Peter shaking off his shackles, and that is based on young Giuliano della Rovere being a priest at San Pietro in Vincoli.
And what's it called?
Raphael's Room of Liberations. The east wall depicts the expulsion of profaners from the temple, and Julius sits there in full pope garb, overlooking the proceedings, and that surely must have had something to do with the cardinals who sided with Louis, I think. Expelling the profaners.
My goodness, it was so good. Such a great artist.
The south wall shows the release of church doctrine from heresy and doubt, for which, according to the picture, we can directly thank Julius. So that's nice. Thank you, June. And on the west wall is the repulsion of the Huns from Rome. So a not so subtle link with Julius's expulsion of the French from Italy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I thought pride was one of the deadly sins, but here's a room that just says,
I'm great.
I'm great. Look at me. Look at me. Aren't I wonderful? So that's art. Well, that's the visual arts. What do people say about him? Machiavelli, when we know, that those of us who signed up to Patreon, that Machiavelli admired Cesare Borgia. And it wasn't that Machiavelli favoured ruthlessness, but he did favour pragmatism.
Yes.
Cesare was to be admired because he did what was necessary for his own hold on power. He didn't do what would make him popular. And Julius was a pragmatic ruler in that, although he had promised Cesare he'd be kept on as leader of the papal army, it turned out not to be particularly good to do that, so he stopped.
Yep.
So Machiavelli must have been in two minds, really, because his perfect prince, Cesare, had been brought down. But by doing this, Julius had brought an end to the anarchy in northern Italy against marauding armies and banditry and saved thousands of lives, until he decided he was going to set off and do something similar.
And kill other people.
Yeah. So by breaking his word with one person, he'd benefited countless others, and that was something that Machiavelli was quite keen on, because I remember you said about the end justifies the means with Machiavelli, and that's quite an example of that. Martin Luther, he was so incensed by Pope Julius that he decided to start the Reformation. So, I mean, that's quite a big point for Petit, I'd have thought.
Yes.
And Erasmus, it may be said that Erasmus owed Julius, since it was Julius who legitimised Erasmus's birth by papal dispensation. But he wrote a dialogue called Pope Julius II, a comical and facetious dialogue between Julius II, evil genius, and St. Peter. And the reason Erasmus decided to write this dialogue was because he was in Bologna when Julius invaded it and had developed a hatred for the Pope. I should say it's not 100% certain Erasmus wrote this, since it was published anonymously, but people are pretty sure it was him. Now, Julius arrives at the pearly gates, surrounded by soldiers who died in his campaign, because he'd promised them they'd go straight to heaven. Although his campaigns were not really crusades.
No.
And Julius finds that his welcome is not what he expected. It starts off with a conversation between the Pope and the evil genius. Mm-hmm. And the genius is a sort of guardian angel. And he's mainly there to make pithy comments. He's not an evil genius as we'd think of one now, maybe. Shall I be Julius and you be the genius?
Sure.
Okay. Hi, Day. No opening of the door? What a plague's the matter? I fancy the lock is changed or confoundedly out of order.
See whether you have applied the right key.
The key's right enough. 'Tis the key of power.
Well, if that won't do, try your key of knowledge.
I never had it in my lifetime, nor do I see any occasion there can be for that superfluous key when the other is in my possession. Julius then asks what they should do.
What then? Why then we are like to be shut out. That's all.
Shut out? Ha ha ha. A pope shut out of heaven? That would be a strange piece of news.
Perhaps not so strange as true.
What, are you all deaf?
For aught I can perceive, we may stand here knocking our heels for all eternity, or, which is more probable, be forced to adjourn to some other place.
So there's no hiding where Erasmus thought Julius was going.
He's going to hell.
When St. Peter does come to the door, Julius complains, and you have to be St. Peter now.
Okay.
'Twas your place and duty to have met me with your celestial courtiers, dressed in all their formalities.
Say you so? 'Tis pity we were not soon apprised of the coming of so distinguished a person, that we might have done you justice. But I must crave leave of your haughtiness, to let me understand who you are, and by what right you have for such extraordinary respect to be shown to you.
What? I warrant you don't see who I am?
See? Yes, truly I do see. An odd and uncouth spectacle, an hideous kind of monster in my judgment.
So Julius first threatens Peter with his army, and then with a bull of excommunication.
Good luck.
Yeah, we heard of the Bishop of London who excommunicated Morton when he was Archbishop of Canterbury. Now we have the Pope threatening to excommunicate St. Peter. And Julius then asks Peter by what right he has to deny him entry, since he, Julius, achieved so much more when he was Pope than Peter did in his papacy. Julius then excuses the sins he had committed throughout his lifetime with the argument that since the Pope can forgive all sins, they don't really count. And it sort of has a happy ending for Julius, because Peter sends him and his soldiers away, but Julius says, well, fine, I'll make my own heaven then, and I'll be the ruler.
Oh dear.
So that is what Erasmus thinks of Julius.
Yes.
That he's sort of puffed up,
Arrogant
thing. Peter's saying, yeah, I've no idea who you are. He's saying, but you must know who I am. Don't you know who I am? It's not quite good to have Erasmus write about you, even if it was not terribly complimentary.
Yes.
I'll add to your team. So that's what we've got. We've got changes in Rome. We've got visual architecture, visual art, and people certainly wrote about him.
And people still know him now. I mean, he had a movie about him in 1965.
Yes.
He's known for being the warrior pope.
Mm-hmm. He's not as famous as the Borgia Pope or the Medici Pope, I don't think.
True.
But, yeah.
I gotta go with a 9 just for getting Michelangelo to do that ceiling.
Yeah.
Michelangelo gets the 10 for painting it.
Yes. Yes, unfortunately for Julius, it's called the Sistine Chapel after his uncle. It's not the Julian Chapel.
Right.
He might have got him to paint the ceiling, but Sixtus actually got them to build the thing in the first
Maybe
place.
Maybe an 8 then.
Yeah, I think 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll go with 8.
So that's 16 for B team.
Float a bleeding float.
I sent you some pictures. The first one shows the young Della Rovere with his uncle Pope Sixtus.
Oh.
Reminding us that he only got his red hat through nepotism. And
right.
Even then he was the companion cardinal to keep his brother company. So, yes. Yeah, so that's him as cardinal. And then next we've got a bust of him looking extremely thuggish.
Yeah.
Even his clothes are thuggish. I mean, he might be wearing a sort of papal cap thing, but it doesn't look like it. It looks more like a helmet.
Helmet.
Yeah.
And
the shadows that are cast indents of his eyes make him look very sinister.
Yes, it does.
Sunglasses.
The clothing is incredibly plain. No brocade there. But he does have buttons, so it's an expensive piece of clothing. Okay.
Mm.
And then
next one is him as Moses, and this is on his tomb.
Is this representative, like a likeness of him with the beard and?
I don't think so. I think it's more. This is Moses, and I'm going to say it's Julius rather than this is Julius, and we're going to say it's Moses.
Right.
And that's on his tomb. It's made by Michelangelo in his workshop.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It was commissioned in 1505, but not finished till 1545, which is long after Julius's death.
Yeah.
And it was considerably toned down because there were meant to be 40 figures on this tomb. Ooh. And it's called a tomb, but it is in San Pietro in Vincoli, whereas Julius's body is in St. Peter's Basilica. So it's not actually a tomb, it's just a commemorative plaque, really.
Yeah, a very, very large one.
Yes. And in fact, the reason it was toned down so much, maybe because the money was diverted to build a basilica.
Right.
Which, presumably, Julius would have been quite happy with, since he wanted the basilica built.
Yeah. And it's not exactly small. Like, that's massive.
The last one is by Raphael.
Yeah.
And this is a beautiful, beautiful one. This is him looking like an Old Testament prophet with his beard that he grew when he was ill.
Yeah.
And this set a precedent for papal portraits because prior to this, popes were shown kneeling, often surrounded by members of the Holy Family.
He's not. He's sitting more... Well, it's not a throne by any stretch of the imagination. It's a plain chair, but...
Well, you'll notice the finials on it are acorns. So from the oak tree, della rovere, means of the oak tree.
Ah, they're very long acorns, but yes, they're acorns.
Yes. But yeah, we think about Alexander's picture. It's got him kneeling in front of the Holy Family, some of which are his girlfriends, it turns out.
Yeah.
But after this, you generally get popes sitting thinking.
More like a monarch.
Yes, well, more contemplative than a monarch, I think.
Yeah. His little fingers aren't dangling over the edge.
No. He's clutching his chair quite a lot, actually, isn't he?
Yeah.
But he does look very pensive.
He looks sad.
And this picture is in the National Gallery in London. It's the first Raphael to enter the collection.
Oh. He has a great deal. I'm going to have to go with a 10.
I think it's gorgeous, this one. The
They're
colouring,
all beautiful.
the background, I think, is just sort of tactile, isn't it? It's just swirly green stuff. But
well, isn't that supposed to be the green marble?
oh, it could be. I sort of felt more... I think it's warmer than marble, but yeah, maybe it is. Yeah.
I don't know. It could be fabric. Fabric backdrop. But all of the art is gorgeous.
Yeah, but Julius was saying that he said he wouldn't shave again until the French had been expelled from Italy.
So, yeah,
yes.
beard.
Yeah, it was quite a brave move since Western prelates didn't wear beards because Eastern Orthodox priests wore beards.
Yeah, right.
But then, if he was ill, perhaps it was painful to sit up
Maybe
and
he had
shave.
syphilis on his face.
Yes, yeah.
Couldn't shave.
Yeah, or maybe he grew it to hide some of the pockmarks and...
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's taken a dark turn on this painting, isn't it? This beautiful painting that is painted to hide his syphilis.
Dark, but very honest.
Yeah, I think... I don't know why not to go for the 10.
I'm going for a 10.
Yeah. I think that's... Especially being the precedent for all the rest of the portraits. Yeah, I think 10. So that's 10 each with 5 each, so that's 10 between us.
Yeah. So the total is 50. Right on the dot.
Exactly, yeah. But we've talked about him for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
But do we think... Ask the question.
Are they too delicious, or what?
What do you think?
No.
No,
I don't like him. He didn't
I agree.
do anything that was amazing or horrific. Like, he didn't hit any of those sides. He's kind of a middle of the road bungler.
Yes, the things he did do, he didn't do well.
Yeah.
He wanted to be a great warrior. He wasn't very good at it.
Yeah.
He did start the Lateran Council, which did make changes to the church, but he didn't want to.
No.
He was sort of pushed into it by Louis starting his council.
Yes.
So, yeah, I'm inclined to agree.
Ooh, that's a no.
Oh, sorry, Julius. I mean, these people, they bust a gut to get this Tudoriferous thing. Don't they? That's all they do it for. But no.
Yep.
We didn't give it to Alexander, did we?
Did
think
we?
so. Can't have done.
Trying to find him here. Oh, goodness. We have done a lot of people now.
Yeah, we have.
Pope Alexander. No, he didn't get it either.
No, that's all right then.
Yep.
Because it would be rolling about in the St. Peter's Basilica if he thought that Alexander had got it and he hadn't.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, who's next then?
Oh. Open up the bag. Full rub. Lambert Simnel.
Ah, right.
Finally.
Okay. Last one, and then we're out of the pretenders.
But we're also back in England.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, no more Italian war.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's been a while.
that'll be nice.
Turns out to be an Italian boy somebody brought from Venice. That would be hilarious.
Probably only about one episode on him, I should think, because we've covered him from so many different angles already.
Yeah, rather than repeating ourselves.
Mind you, having said that, I didn't think there was going to be
long.
4 on Julius. Oh, right, yes, I shall enjoy that. I shall enjoy coming back to England for a while and leaving Italy behind for a bit.
Yeah.
This is the end of our episodes on Julius. We hope you enjoy them, and will join us for the next episode on... Well, there's a couple of Julius-related cameos, and then it's Margaret of Austria.
Margaret of Austria.
Thank you for listening.
You can find details of the podcast and contact us on...
Tudoriferous.wordpress.com. Email tudoriferous@gmail.com. We're on Podbean and all the usual platforms. Also Facebook and Twitter and Instagram.
In the meantime, war gives the right to the conquerors to impose any condition they please upon the vanquished.
We must have bloody noses and cracked crowns, and pass them current, too. God's me my horse. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
War, never ending, has historians confused. War, terrible war, to unravel the complications. War, nightmare-like, we're battered and we're bruised. Just trying to work out all the relations. King Ferrante of Naples, in spite of his grey curls, had been up to murders despicable. He died, then Alonso, his son, came along, so that was a succession predictable. But King Charles of France took a most different stance and believed he ought to succeed. His friends and advisers revealed their incisors and nagged him till he went weak-kneed. With stories chivalrous, counts mischievous, they got him to go to war. He went off straight away before Anne could delay him, she really could be quite a bore. Ludovico Schwartz was happy to endorse an attempt to dispose of his rivals. He invited him in, said he'd surely win, and embarked on a plan suicidal. In a twist of the tale, the king did prevail, and he swept down the country unhindered. But the people of Naples, they soon turned the tables, because all his troops were light-fingered. They wanted them out, so they cast about for a way to prevent their viciousness. The troops then fell ill, their health went downhill, and they all went down with syphilis. When his head hit the lintel, there was no hint that Charles would die of contusions. But if Italians had hoped Louis be more remote, he was soon to shatter their illusions. With his eyes on Milan, he revealed his game plan and arrived at the head of an army. His victory complete, he was still not replete and prepared to unleash a tsunami. Florence just dithered their influence with it, they decided to stay with the French. So did Ferrara, which is more like Gomorrah since the pox had become quite entrenched. Meanwhile back in Rome with ills of his own, as he tried to stop the Phoenicians from stealing his land, it had got out of hand when he'd rather be fighting the heathens. Then Venice forgiven, Julius had misgivings and decided to get rid of the French. With his love of intrigue, he then joined the League and they set out to seek their revenge. Maximilian was courted but eventually thwarted, and money was all that impressed him. But he was zealous, pursuing Venice and his magic crown, bless him. The battle seesawed, especially Bologna, but at last Louis beat a retreat. So they could relax, 'twas an anticlimax, but at least it turned down the heat. But now what is this? With the help of the Swiss, here's the ego of Ferdinand of Aragon. He's a man with a plan, with his sneaky program, Machiavelli thought him a paragon. Not only Naples, he tried to enable his grandson to have most of the north. Henry VIII was his stooge just before he was huge, and the battles just went back and forth. Italy was a wreck, a real pain in the neck, and the slashings of blades with his battles and plagues. Not to mention the clap, we begin to backtrack, since from this disastrous staking plaster. Mona Lisa, done by some geezer, despite the flat nose, we have Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, then we try to grapple with Botticelli, who gave us some welly. But the darkness has passed, and it's daylight at last, and the war's been long, ditto, ditto, my song. And for more of it, listen into next season.